WNST, Taos in Baltimore, and WNST.net. The Carolina Panthers are the enemy this week as we head down to Charlotte, North Carolina. They got their hands full down there just in general with news and topicalities we've talked about all week. This guy now covering the Carolina Panthers for The Athletic down there after a long run in the digital and news business. Joseph Person can be followed at Joseph Person at Twitter. Tens of thousands do follow him for all sorts of Panthers insider stuff, as well as some deep craft beer knowledge that we're going to get to later on in the segment. And out at theathletic.com. What's going on, dude? How's life down there in Charlotte? I'm looking forward to getting down there for a couple days and taking in the barbecue and the Southern culture. And what I think is going to be a pretty good football game, too. And two teams sort of moving in directions here in the middle of the season. Pretty important game on both sides.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, the Panthers kind of, I won't say saved their season, but they, the big difference between 3-3 and 4-2, and they had a tough loss on the road at Washington. It looked like they were headed for another tough loss at Philly. Cam pulls them off the mat, 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, and here the Panthers are sitting pretty good and feeling pretty good about themselves this week, but knowing they have a very tough professional football team coming in here in the Baltimore Ravens. And no week's a picnic in the NFL, but it's certainly never a picnic facing the Ravens defense and a John Harbaugh coach team.
Yeah, this is the fourth week out of 5 on the road. We did 3 in a row, came home, lost, obviously, in dramatic fashion, quite frankly, and jaw-dropping fashion when a guy that's made 222 straight field goals or extra points misses one. But they're now more like field goals than extra points. I guess, half of that's in the old era and the new era. But, you mentioned usually it's our kicker that picks us up off the mat, quite frankly, right? I mean, that's been the story of the last 6 years where the kicker's been the MVP around here 3 or 4 of the years. Cam Newton's the guy that picks the Carolina Panthers up off the mat. And, I'm a Cam detractor, right? So you're around it, you're a winner. But great players and players that we have that level of expectation. I think with Newton, it's always been about maturity and handling success and handling failure and where he is. Because I think everyone sees the capability of him to be this robo super quarterback. He was that right on up until the second half in Santa Clara a couple of years ago. That if you surround him and he stays healthy, I fully believe you can win a championship with him. But much like Ric Flair, you're either going to root for him or against him. So he'll go NWO Hollywood Hogan for me, and I turn him into the heel. But I know in your part of the world, he's the reason you're going to win a championship there.
Yeah, he's a very polarizing figure for sure, and he has been since day one. And I don't think it's a racial thing. I mean, that may be part of it, quite frankly, playing down here in the South. But he just the way that he carries himself. He's a new school quarterback. He doesn't want to play by your rules. He doesn't want to fit the mold of a prototypical quarterback. He sits in the pocket and and carries himself a certain way. He celebrates. He's loud. He's ostentatious. He wears a bunch of crazy wardrobes. But the guy, you have to say, has been pretty darn good for this franchise for now in his 8th season. I mean, he's gotten to the Super Bowl. He didn't win it, and listen, he that's what's still driving him. More so than the MVP. Repeat. He already has one of those on his mantle.
Hey, man, I don't think it's bad. I don't like Jerry Jones or Robert Kraft
either,
right? So, you find people you root for. I mean, everybody hates Tom Brady. I mean, you wanted to hate Peyton Manning, but you almost couldn't and you almost can't. But if they were all like Peyton Manning, it wouldn't be any fun. I mean, people have they don't like Joe Flacco. And I'm like, what? You don't like Super Bowl MVPs, So I'm a Flacco proponent. But when it comes to Newton, the whole... The maturity part for you to be around them on a daily basis. And look, we had Steve Smith here, and you had Steve Smith, who's about the moodiest human being I've probably ever met in any walk of life anywhere, where it was always a box of chocolates, and some days it was lovely, and some days it was, Prince of Darkness. And so we're around all this, but the losing part for Newton, when you're going to lose 4 or 5 times a year, even when you're good, and how he handles that at 30 probably should be better than how he handled it at 22. And we're now getting to that point where I think 8 years in, he's not going to win every year, but how he handles losing is going to be judged with a microscope by people like me, I think. Yeah,
and you know what? That's a good point. And listen, is he still going to be upset after tough losses? Yeah, but you know what? As you were saying that, Nestor, I was taken back to last week, 2 weeks ago at Washington. He comes into the press conference room. He's not sulking. He doesn't have, a hood on over a hoodie like after the Super Bowl. He is very much. I mean, he said it. He said, "Look, I'm not going to come up here and throw a pity party. We made mistakes. We'll correct them. And we're going to keep moving on." And he wasn't, and he wasn't like too high last week at Philly. So I do think I've seen a more mature Cam Newton in year 8, and I think Norv Turner has helped him become more mature on the football field, where he doesn't feel the need to complete every pass in tight windows. He is comfortable taking checkdowns to Christian McCaffrey, 2 of which, by the way, fueled that game-winning drive against the Eagles.
It's nice to have a guy you can check down to that's that guy, right? Like when Joe Flacco had Ray Rice hanging out in the flat, there was a different kind of offense, and I think that's sort of a separator with the Le'Veon Bells and the teams that, Drew Brees has that in Kamara and also a running back. So when we saw that last week, and, that's a great way to neutralize the Ravens, defensively, is to have that sort of an outlet.
Yeah, and the Panthers didn't have that for a long time. D'Angelo Williams was, he was an okay receiver, but he not the kind of receiver in class of the guys you just were talking about, and certainly not Jonathan Stewart either. So, when they drafted him, the whole idea was to give Cam that outlet, to give a guy that he could get the ball out of his hands quickly, so that he was not sitting in the pocket or having to run all the time himself. Because you remember, they drafted McCaffrey in 2017, coming off of a 2016 season when Cam got beat up. He just got there. Some of the hits were legal, some of them were not legal. But
some of them changed the rules, quite frankly. Some of them are the reason everybody's standing in Week 7, except Garoppolo.
He had he had a mid-season conversation with Goodell. And I, famously at the end of the season, Cam said, football wasn't real fun for me this year. I want to get back to having fun. Having Christian McCaffrey as a little safety valve has made it more fun for Cam Newton.
Well, and they used the franchise kind of pick on him, right? So, he needed to be sort of a transcendent player, and quite frankly has been. And, he's the most dynamic player not named Cam Newton on the team, and that probably includes Kuechly at this point, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, people, it's funny, traditional football people want to look and say, well, where are the 100-yard games? Because he's only had one. And, where's the 4.5-yard rushing average? All this stuff. No, he's different. They didn't draft him to let him run between the tackles 25 times a game. Norv Turner has found interesting and dynamic ways to use him. There's still parts of this offense that they're still kind of ready to unveil. How it works. The first maybe 6 games this season, you're running stuff to set up other plays, misdirection and whatever for the latter half of the season. So the Panthers still a work in progress. I tell you one thing we haven't talked about: very surprising play of a patchwork offensive line, which will get tested again this week by the Ravens team.
Joseph Person is our guest. You can find Joe at The Athletic, where they don't have crash commercial announcements, but we do. We are sponsored by Patrick's in Essex. I want to give everybody a shout-out. Tell them get down there and check out the Johnny U Wall. We're going to be doing an event down there next month. Love to see everybody come out to Essex and say hello. Cold beer, great bands, never a cover. I was talking to Paulie Lamanti about maybe putting the band back together, going and sitting on a stool there and strumming a little bit. Salad, sandwiches, pub grub, and the games are always on. Steak night is Thursday night, just $11.99. Some Thursdays, they even go prime rib, go all in. Tacos on Monday, shrimp on Tuesday, wings on Wednesday. It is Pat Ricks in Essex. Tell them we said hello. Also, the Modell Lyric. Going to be hearing from our friends in the band Kansas a little later on. They're playing at the Modell Lyric on November 24th. I don't think John Mellencamp's going to sit down and talk to me, but I can only hope and wish that we could talk about Pink Houses. But he's going to be there on February 20th. Joe Bonamassa, Straight No Chaser. Beach Boys bringing the Christmas Act on December the 2nd as well. There's always magic at the Modell Lyric. Learn more at modell-lyric.com. Also got to shout out Sydney over at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. Since 1923, true love comes in all shapes and sizes. There's something for everyone's budget at charlesnewsonoff.com. 50% off this week. That's what I got to shout out. 50% off. See them in Parkville at charlesnewsonoff.com, where they say, let's grow old together. Joseph Person can be found out at The Athletic and covering all things Panthers down there in Charlotte as we head down to Charlotte. Look, I want to stay on the field, but I think the off-the-field thing, not very many weeks do I get anything this juicy, right? Like, we only get together with you guys every 4 years. It's been 8 years since I took 5 bus loads down there and took over the Epicenter and the Whiskey River Bar and all that stuff. And your team stunk, and you guys had Steve Smith, and then we got Steve. There's been a lot of, going on, right? And the Caruth thing this week is incredible. The Jerry Richardson saga that began last year on your watch after, covering this franchise for a decade, sort of an incredible story unto itself. I think the Steve Smith, where his legacy is, there's just a lot going on with the franchise and this new owner who's drinking beer in the parking lot. He's from Pittsburgh. I'm not predisposed to like him, Joe.
Yeah, you're right. David Tepper has it's been a breath of fresh air, though. He has been everything that Jerry Richardson was not, and that's not to knock. It's easy to kick Jerry while he's down, but listen, he brought football. He brought the NFL to the Carolinas, and by the way,
kept it out of Baltimore at that time too.
That's right. That's a good point. You mentioned a lot. I don't know how. I guess.
Well, let's start with Caruth. Let's start at the top because that's the fresh story, and that really does go back to Jerry and his franchise and them being involved in drafting and sort of harboring this cat in the same way that the Aaron Hernandez thing, to me, never reflected poorly upon the Patriots, maybe the way it should have. I feel like, in that part of the world 20 years ago, and we had our Ray Lewis thing going on here. We had a Jamal Lewis thing. We had a Ray Rice thing here. We've had jurisprudence issues here, certainly when we're following Ray Lewis down to Atlanta in an orange jumpsuit right around that period of time. For the league at that time, for Tagliabue, but for this guy to walk out onto the streets is really sort of a sobering thing for all of us to see the passage of time, to see sort of the Charles Manson walking the streets of Charlotte, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I came on, so I've been on the beat only 9 years. So Ray Caruth was just sort of this horrible name and idea, and of course I'd read and knew the backstory, but it just sort of, he was tucked away 3 hours away from Charlotte in this prison, and even when you would read about the 2018 potential release date, it always it just seemed like it was out there in the distance.
Yeah, it's like Halley's Comet. It just feels way.
You're right, though. To see the pictures of him, the video images of him walking out of that prison in eastern North Carolina this week, it was surreal. Your heart went out to the victim's family after all these years, the grandmother who's raised the child with cerebral palsy, but she's, there was a time when she said she wanted to be at the prison gates when he got out, and I think she thought the better of that because it would have been a complete media circus. Ray Caruth got in a white Chevy Tahoe, sped away, and living presumably somewhere in North Carolina, but we don't know that. That hasn't been broken yet. But I just keep thinking of the Chancellor Adams, who's the son who was born that night. As his mother went tragically into a coma and then later died, and he has he's been robbed of having what you would call a normal life too. I mean, he doesn't speak, and the whole thing's terrible. And now, 19 years later, Ray Carruth's a free man.
Well, and again, for our society and where we are, an election coming up, you never think about that in the context of it not being a famous guy, that every day someone walks out of jail that did something really, really horrible, you know. And to your point, I don't know that a media circus, I mean, it's sort of like every other media circus, right? Like 48 hours later, he's just another O.J. Simpson until something stupid happens and he winds up back in the camera's eye, right? Like literally, and your market's the place that cares about it. No one else outside of Charlotte really sort of attacked that story. It came to me sort of briefly on my Twitter for a morning, and then it went away, right?
Yeah, you're right, and you hope that there were lessons learned in over 2 decades in prison. I know. I believe he became a Muslim in prison, so I don't know. I can't speak too intelligently about it just because I was not here at the time. I followed it. Frankly, Scott Fowler, my former colleague at the Charlotte Observer, has been on top of the story and has gotten to know the son and the grandmother of Sharika Adams. And
on the newspaper side, I know they did a whole series, and it is a major story there in the way that Freddie Gray was a major story here. It still is a major story here. Joe Person joining us here. He is at The Athletic. Tell everybody what you do at The Athletic, and go ahead and pimp away for the good work that you folks do there in breaking news and covering the teams, as Jeff Zrebeck does here in Baltimore.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. It's funny because I'm still getting up every morning, leaving the house and going to the Bank of America Stadium, but you're just doing it a little differently. This week, where when I was at the Observer, where I'd probably write 6-7 stories over the course of a game week, I'm writing 2 or 3, and it's been a bit of an adjustment. But the idea is we're doing real in-depth storytelling, and I'm not suggesting it's all like expose style writing. It's not. It's the kind of writing that I grew up with, and I did something this week on that 2010 game you referenced with the Ravens, and I revisited Brian St. Pierre, and this guy had been a career backup. He'd never started an NFL game. He'd been on his couch 2 weeks before helping raise his newborn son in Boston. And 9 days later, he's facing Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs and company.
And 25,000 Raven fans, by the way.
Yeah. That's right. And so that, we're doing those kind of stories. I've enjoyed it. It's been cool. It's been a way to kind of connect with readers on kind of a different level.
Well, I've got so many things to talk to all you guys about, but the Jerry Richardson thing's fascinating to me because we've had a bad baseball owner here who's done all sorts of antisocial things in so many ways to destroy the baseball franchise while sort of bilking it of $1 billion of this television money that everybody from 6 states has paid for a generation now. And we're all sort of assessing it all, that you bring a team, you buy a team, we build a stadium. Your guy Max Muleman down there, remember his name and selling PSLs. I called them poor suckers license. I'm an owner of 2 of them, by the way, 23 years later. And, we had the knee here, and it affected everything. We've won championships, and that's something that's eluded your population down there. And Jerry Richardson, was a Colt and was a John Stedman guy back in the 80s when I worked at the newspaper, and, the Denny's and all that stuff and the racial bias and all the things that sort of stuck to him. But this whole thing is sort of skirt grabbing as a dirty old man and with employees and, all of the sort of lurid tales of all this. It is kind of amazing how quickly they can get another captain into the seat at $1.5 billion, right? And that when they want to make a move, they can get rid of somebody. When they need to get rid of somebody, they can get rid of somebody. But Mark Davis can run off into the desert, right? And the same thing would be said for like the Clippers and getting rid of that clown who ran that team for 40 years into the ground. But, something awry. And you hope for a new day, but Richardson was sort of beloved there, man. Like, there's a statue in front of the place for him because that's what egotistical people do, I guess. But, there's a whole legacy sort of weirdness there in this aftermath in some sort of Joe Paterno way, too, where I don't know how much of it sticks to Jerry Richardson, but he sort of kind of can't come out of the house, right?
Yeah, the thing about, again, when I came here 9 years ago, your Paterno reference is a good one, and I grew up in north central Pennsylvania. Here's what I remember: everyone around the organization called him Mr. Richardson, and most reporters referred to him as Mr. Richardson, and there was just this level of reverence that I never felt real comfortable with. I don't think that's healthy in any walk of life to have your boss or your supervisor, whomever it may be.
Well, in the South too, it feels a little plantation-y.
Thank you. Yeah, the whole thing just had a bad ring to it. I didn't like it. One of the first things when Tepper came in here, because I'd seen, he was referred to and still is in print as David Tepper. And I asked one of his kind of cronies, I said, what do you call him? Dave. We call him Dave. and I like that. We're finding out more and more about these owners, and some of them are a little creepy. Some of the Richardson stuff, I'm not going to make excuses, certainly, or rationalize it. Thankfully, it doesn't sound like it rose to the level of some other cases, with Matt Lauer and the likes of that. But it was still completely unprofessional. It was creepy. It made women in the building feel uncomfortable, and I just think that as I said earlier, that having Dave Tepper come in and kind of bring a new atmosphere and a new aura around the building's been helpful.
He is Joe Person. You can find him at Joseph Person on Twitter. Tens of thousands do in the Carolina Panthers Blue Nation that once stormed Santa Clara. It was fun for a couple quarters there. Steve Smith is something that we share. And I did a show with Steve when my wife was battling leukemia. He was good to me, but I also saw him do outlandishly awful things, through times. I know he's written about some of his personal challenges as well. A conflicted dude, a talented dude, a super intelligent dude, a dude that has this incredible super kindness about him. But in your community, he is, sort of the Ray Lewis. And, Ray comes around here and they throw parades for him and we pay the cops and he beats on his chest and talks about my town, my town, my town. He didn't even live here. You know what I mean? But Steve Smith has sort of immersed in your city, and I probably will live there forever. I don't think he's going back to East L.A. Steve Smith is something over the next 20 or 30 years that will be a good representation, I think we would all hope, for the Panthers, and I think he wants that for his legacy. And I think, I think he's going to the Hall of Fame, Joe. If I'm the Baltimore representative 7, 8, 9 years from now and I have to stand up in front of the room, I wouldn't have a hard time making a case for Steve Smith as a Hall of Famer.
No, I think he'll get in the Hall of Fame, and I think he should. And I had the same experience as you did covering him. I mean, the gamut ran from him threatening me one time at training camp to running into him at the airport with my family, and him being incredibly gracious and talking to my kids and my wife and that kind of thing. It's just that's kind of who he is. And
you know what? He's the most complex dude I've ever. I mean, I've been doing this 34 years. I'd be hard pressed. There's some complex guys. I think Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. I think being a star, growing up poor and with limited education around you and limited, people around you, and finding yourself with $100 million. I mean, we've watched it over the course of time, both of us, in doing this for a living. It is very, very complex. It really is.
It is, and it's, life is never black and white. It's not, and sometimes in our neat little 20-inch game stories on Sunday, we try to make someone out to be the hero and someone else to be the villain. We talked about that earlier in the show. But it's gray. I mean, and there's layers to everybody and everything. Steve Smith happens to have a lot of those layers. Some of them are very infuriating and a little dangerous at times early in his career to his teammates. But the other layers are him putting on all kinds of different charity events here in Charlotte. And, you kind of take the good and the bad. You take the black and the white with Steve, and it's a very interesting, complex individual who was one hell of a football player.
And he is very, very involved. And the last thing, from Steve Smith to Torrey Smith and from where the team is, we all have affection for Torrey Smith here, as we did for Ed Dixon and Michael Orr before them. How good's this team? And, where's Torrey Smith's role in this offense? And obviously the offense has just struggled, Joe, right? I mean, at various points it's been sputter, 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 and then bang, you beat the world champs on the road. And that's where we find them, in the second act of this 4-act play, right?
Yeah, Torrey's been kind of a good kind of symbolic a little bit, microcosm of the offense. He hasn't been like just gangbusters going crazy, with all kinds of down the field plays. But when they've needed him and called on him, he's been effective at the end of these games, especially. 35-yard catch and run last week at Philly, and that's been kind of the offense. We have not seen the explosive plays that I think a lot of us expected when Norv Turner came in here. But you look up at the end of the day, and they're they haven't been blown out any games. Their 2 losses were both by less than a touchdown, and they're 4-2, and in my mind they still look like a playoff team, barring any big injury to a Kuechly or a Cam Newton. And this should be said too. I mean, this is a franchise. We talked a lot about the legacy of Jerry Richardson and now David Tepper. This organization now in 24, 25 years has never had back-to-back winning seasons. Well, it looks like they're on their way, but the folks in Charlotte are all, listening to this would be knocking on wood right now.
Joseph Person covering all things Carolina Panthers. You can find him out at The Athletic, where they do great work, as well as Joseph Person out on Twitter. I'm looking forward to seeing you down in Carolina. I keep getting barbecue recommendations from short story long, and I know you're from Northern. Are you from Scranton by any chance, or what part of Pennsylvania are you from?
I'm from Williamsport with the Little League World Series.
Oh, so from Montoursville, the land of the Messinas. Okay.
Mike Messina. I played against Mike Messina as a kid and all through high school.
And he was pretty good, as I remember. And I shared a picture, he and I drinking beer backstage with Van Halen in 1994 online this week, because I had the Van Halen book author on. So I've had some Messina flashbacks this week. My dad's from Scranton, so I have an affection for everybody from that part of the world. And I've spent some time in your hometown. I loved your hometown, man.
Yeah, it's funny. I won't be that guy that says, "Oh yeah, I took Mike Messina deep." No, dude. When we would face Mike Messina, we'd be happy coming back to the dugout if we made contact again.
He had the knuckle curve rolling when he was 14, from what I understand.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I also understand he could have kicked and punted at Penn State. That's true too, right?
The guy was incredible. I guess he's back up there still coaching now, or not even baseball, coaching football or basketball, something like that.
Yeah, his brother's a dear friend of mine, so I have him on about once a month. So you're not the only Montoursville, Williamsport kind of guy we've had on. So my mom is from Abbeville, South Carolina. My mom passed away last year at the age of 98. So I haven't been to her hometown in 30 years. So I got like this drive, and if the weather's good. So I'm looking for anything that's like uniquely cool or Southern to do that's not the NASCAR Hall of Fame, because that's not who I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's where would I send you? when we interviewed a Jordan Rodriguez on the beat now for the Observer, she said, "Well, what's fun to do here?" And I said, "Do you like beer?" Because Charlotte does have a cool beer culture, but there's a lot of other things cool things to do. You could take a hike up Crowder's Mountain, which is pretty cool out east of town, I guess that is, or excuse me, west of town. You'll find plenty to do, but having a thirst when you arrive would help.
So it says here craft beer expert right on your Twitter, man. So, give me a place. Where am I going to go get a delicious stout this time of year on maybe a chilly evening in Charlotte? Where are you sending me, man?
Listen, we have more brew pubs and craft beer places now. I mean, every time I think we've just saturated the market, like 3 more open up. So I don't know where you're staying, but you walk outside and walk couple 100 yards and you'll run into a great place to have a beer.
All right, well, there you go. So Charlotte is a beer town. I did not know that. You're about the 3rd person that brought that up. I always think of Asheville as being the beer place in North Carolina, but Carolina's a beer state. Now, good for me to know that. Joe, appreciate the time today. Thanks for talking some Panthers football with us, man.
All right, buddy. Have a safe trip, and good to speak with you.
You got it. Joseph Person. He is Joe Person at The Athletic, as well as Joseph Person on Twitter, and find him out there for all things Carolina Panthers. And a striking voice resemblance to John Eisenberg, who's from Dallas, Texas. So who says the South doesn't change a man? Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, including our WNS TV channel. And the buyatoyota.com audio vault, where it all lives all week long. I'm talking to politicians out in Baltimore County, Johnny O and Al Rebmer. You'll be hearing that at AM 1570. I am encouraging everyone to get out and vote on November 6th for whatever color you like, but certainly red, blue, purple, wherever it is. Exercise the great American right and vote. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.